Hello, and thanks for stopping by. If you saw my last video, which I'll link up in the corner and down below in case you missed it, then you'll know that two of London's mainline railway terminals, Victoria and Waterloo, once had cinemas on their premises, which were initially designed for screening newsreels, cartoons and so on. These gorgeous Art Deco buildings were impressive enough, but just 2 years after they unveiled their grand picture house in 1934, the bigwigs at Waterloo decided to go one better by installing a television room for the public within the station. This of course being in an era when such technology was both prohibitively expensive and still in its infancy. London is closely connected to the early history of television, largely due to the fact that the Scottish inventor and all-round genius, John Logie Baird, conducted pioneering work on the medium in his attic laboratory on Frith Street in Soho, below which you'll now find one of the city's most beloved cafes, Bar Italia. The story of Logie Baird's time in London is a fascinating one, and it deserves a video in its own right. If this is indeed something you'd like to see, then please be sure to let me know in the comments, and if there's enough demand, I'll get working on it. For the purposes of our Waterloo story though, we now need to skip to August 1936, when a trade show known as Radio Olympia was held in London. As you can probably guess from its title, this event showcased the latest developments in radio technology and was based at the Olympia Exhibition Centre in West Kensington. Radio Olympia had been a regular expo since the 1920s, but the one that took place in the late summer of 1936 was especially notable as it showcased advancements in television as well as radio, and to this end, a selection of the latest TV sets, all of which were very pricey, were put on display. Although these models were already a far cry from John Logie Baird's squat little televisor units, which had been produced in the late 1920s and early 30s to provide a rudimentary level of programming within the London area, there was no television service to speak of in 1936, meaning the screens on these brand spanking new models were blank. This awkward snag didn't last too long though, as the British Broadcasting Corporation were in the process of planning a regular television service, and so arrangements were made for the BBC to beam a series of high-definition test broadcasts to Radio Olympia from their fledgling television studios at Alexandra Palace in North London. These high-definition broadcasts were the first of their kind and used John Logie Baird's system of 240 lines, which was a significant step up from his earlier 30-line system. The first demonstration went out at 11:45 AM on Wednesday the 26th of August 1936.
Hello Radio Olympia, this is direct television from the studios at the Alexandra Palace.
The content of this historic broadcast was described the following day in this report from the Scotsman newspaper. First, there appeared the announcer in the Baird Spotlight studio high up in Alexandra Palace, some of the towers of which were seen. And then came a film showing the evolution of communication from the spoken word to the printed book. In this, messages were given by Somerset Maugham, Sapper A.P. Herbert, Rebecca West, and other literary celebrities. A newsreel was also screened along with a rendition of a song entitled Here's Looking at You, which was sung by Helen Mackay. Over the next 2 weeks, the BBC studios at Alexandra Palace continued to broadcast to Radio Olympia twice a day. The transmissions were aired via two competing systems, John Logie Baird's, which started the proceedings, and another engineered by Marconi EMI, which operated on 405 lines. These two arrangements took it in turn to transmit on alternative days, in what was essentially a battle royale to see who the BBC would adopt as their main system. In the end, Marconi EMI won. The programme cobbled together to facilitate these experimental broadcasts was entitled Here's Looking at You, hence the aforementioned Helen Mackay song, and was essentially a variety show. Being 1936, it went out live, which must have put the singers, dancers, and knife throwers under considerable pressure. Here's Looking at You also featured Miss Looty and her wonder horse, who was called Pogo in case you're wondering, who'd been drafted in from the London Pavilion Theatre. As well as the stand at Radio Olympia, where the public watched the pioneering transmissions in small, darkened booths, Here's Looking at You could also be viewed on a handful of other television sets dotted around London. These included a receiver inside the Baird offices on the Haymarket, which was reserved for journalists, on a set at the Science Museum, inside several department stores, and in the special TV room at Waterloo Station. The television set located at Waterloo was a Baird T5 type model with a 14-inch screen and beautiful walnut panelling. They really don't make them like that anymore, do they? It had been purchased by the Southern Railway Company, who operated Waterloo in those days, for the eye-watering sum of 85 guineas. If you're good at converting old money, please do feel free to quote me an adjusted price in the comments, but I think it's safe to say that 85 guineas in 1936 would have probably gone some way to securing you a nice family car. Unsurprisingly, surviving models of this type are ultra rare nowadays. Back in 2012, a Baird T5 set like the one used at Waterloo went under the hammer at Bonham's Auctioneers in Knightsbridge, where it fetched £27,500. Waterloo's TV was plugged into a waiting room opposite platform 16, an area now occupied by the station's main ticket office. The room was chosen as it was underused at the time, and upon being requisitioned, it was, as one report at the time described, transformed into a tiny theatre with 25 chairs. Due to the fact that it was a very expensive piece of kit, and also no doubt to discourage prying hands from fiddling with the dials, the station's television set was surrounded by a protective bar. Seats for the very first broadcast on August 26 were reserved to Waterloo staff, and despite a brief hitch in the afternoon session, the set ran smoothly. It was also noted, with some apparent surprise, that despite the proximity of the electric trains, there was little or no interference with the transmission. Over the next 2 weeks, Waterloo's television theatre was open to the public, provided of course you had a valid railway ticket, and the gimmick proved so popular that entry had to be strictly controlled, with groups of 25 people being packed in for just 5 minutes at a time. Overall, it was estimated that some 8,000 people managed to catch their first ever glimpse of television thanks to Waterloo's little theatre during the 2-week-long Radio Olympia event. In October 1936, further test broadcasts were carried out by the BBC, with one of the most notable programmes being Picture Page, which first went out on the 8th of that month. Picture Page featured various characters in variety acts, and was hosted by the Canadian actress Joan Miller, who played the role of a switchboard operator, supposedly connecting a viewer to each segment of the show. Quite a forward-thinking concept when you think about it.
BBC Television, this is the switchboard of Picture Page, topical magazine introducing visitors, types and personalities. You're through. You're looking at Type Major Massey, the bagpipes man from Trafalgar Square. You're looking at Oliver Oldfield, who cleans London statues. The Pearly King and Queen of Blackfriars, Mr. and Mrs. Tinsley. Sergeant Major Lynch of the Royal Hospital, Chelsea, with 2 Chelsea pensioners. Josh Cairn, a London street musician. The racecourse character, Vance Prince Waterloo. You're looking at dances from the English Folk Dance and Song Society.
Waterloo's TV theatre remained available for these autumn test broadcasts, leading the London Daily News to label the setup Television While You Wait. The Derby Evening Telegraph, meanwhile, had a more philosophical slant, stating that Waterloo's television service is certainly giving the rail-travelling public the benefits of modern science, and incidentally, a demonstration in advance of the 40-odd million people in the country. As in August, the October broadcasts required a valid railway ticket, and sessions were limited to just 5 minutes, with lengthy queues forming outside the television waiting room. On the 8th of October, a correspondent writing for the Yorkshire Evening Post gave a wonderful eyewitness account of what he'd seen the previous day. Performances were free, but it was necessary to show a railway ticket. Policemen mounted guard, and in vain did some small boys try to squeeze past with bus tickets. They returned, however, in triumph, with train tickets to Vauxhall costing 2p, and were duly admitted. During this period, Waterloo's television theatre was only open when programmes were on air, which wasn't for very long at all, just 2 hours per day, the first session being between 11am and noon, and the second going out between 3 and 4pm. The station's TV theatre was closed on weekends. Following this period of experimental programming, the BBC officially commenced a regular schedule of high-definition broadcasting from Alexandra Palace on the 2nd of November 1936. Waterloo Station itself would appear on television on the 22nd of June 1939, when news cameras were set up at the station to capture the arrival of the King and Queen, who were returning from a tour of the USA and Canada. The two princesses, Elizabeth and Margaret, who'd come to meet their parents, also appeared. To facilitate this broadcast, 2,200 yards of television cabling had to be wound throughout the terminal. Once the regular BBC service began in November 1936, which again was only for 2 hours per day, with one session in the afternoon and another in the evening, it's not entirely clear how long Waterloo's television waiting room remained in place. I think it's fair to assume though that, considering the money the Southern Railway had invested in the set, along with the success it enjoyed and the modern image it portrayed, the little TV theatre would have been maintained for some time. It may even still have been in place on the 1st of September 1939, when, following a broadcast of the Disney cartoon Mickey's Gala premiere, in which the famous mouse dreams he'd been kissed by Greta Garbo, followed by the screening of a test card, the BBC television service abruptly went off air, as the Alexandra Palace transmitter was shut down in preparation for the imminent outbreak of the Second World War. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this look at Waterloo's pioneering little television theatre. Sadly, I doubt anyone watching this video will be old enough to have experienced Waterloo's TV set firsthand, but please do feel free to share your earliest television memories in the comments. And don't forget, if you'd like to see a similar video about John Logie Baird's time in London, please be sure to let me know. I've really enjoyed reading your thoughts on my past few videos. There have been some great insights and some very kind words too. Thank you so much to all of you. Thanks also if you've subscribed recently, it's wonderful to have you along. If you haven't yet subscribed, I'd appreciate it very much if you could please consider doing so, as this will ensure you don't miss out on any future content, as well as helping the channel to grow. And if you do sign up, don't forget to click the bell to receive notifications. If merchandise is something that tempts you, you may like to know that I have an Etsy store, Rob's Online Designs, where you'll find a selection of mugs featuring hand-drawn designs of tube trains, taxis, buses and so on. And if you'd like more London-based content in the meantime, please be sure to head on over to my website, robslondon.com. Links are all in the description. For now, thanks again friends, stay well and please be sure to stay tuned.